The sun was setting over the blood-soaked valley of Thermon, and the air still smelled of iron, sweat, and smoke. The cries of crows echoed above the battlefield, swooping low over the armor of fallen men whose faces were already gray with death. Among the corpses, the scarlet cloaks of the Spartans gleamed like tongues of fire. They had won, but victory in Sparta was never gentle. It was merely the permission to be cruel without question. Far beyond the battlefield, the wives of the defeated Argive warriors waited in silence. They had heard the clash of metal from their hilltop village, then the thunderous silence that followed. They knew what that silence meant. Defeat. The word itself was a death sentence. For Spartan mercy was a thing that only poets imagined. Never soldiers. As dusk deepened, a column of Spartan soldiers marched through the valley road toward the captured town. At their head rode Lysandros, a war captain whose eyes were said to be as cold as the mountain snow. His armor bore no ornament, only scars, scratches, and dark stains that no amount of washing could remove. He had been raised since boyhood to know that compassion was weakness. For him, victory was not complete until every trace of the enemy's pride was erased. When the gates of the village opened, not by choice but by fear, the women saw what Sparta truly was. They expected the roar of men demanding plunder, but the Spartans entered in silence, as if a ritual was beginning. Children clung to their mothers, eyes wide, faces pale. An old woman whispered a prayer to Hera, but her voice trembled, as if even the gods had abandoned her. Lysandros dismounted and looked around the village square. "Bring forth the women," he said. His voice was calm, too calm, the kind of calm that comes just before thunder. No one moved. Finally, one of his soldiers, broad, silent, disciplined, dragged a trembling man forward. It was the village elder. Lysandros looked at him with something between pity and disdain. "Your men fought bravely," he said. "They died as warriors should. But Sparta does not fight merely to kill. We fight to cleanse. To remind the world what happens when one defies us." The elder's voice cracked. "Please, the women. The children." Lysandros lifted his hand. "They will serve Sparta now." At that moment, a sound rose from the crowd, a wail, long and shattering. It was not just fear. It was the collapse of everything that had once given meaning to life. The wives of the fallen warriors knew that in Sparta's law, conquered women were not simply captives. They were tools of victory, tokens to breed loyalty or humiliation. The thought alone was unbearable, but Lysandros had something different in mind that night. He turned to his men. "No chaos," he said. "No dishonor. Sparta takes no pleasure in madness. We will do as our forefathers did. The strong will shape the weak." His soldiers nodded in unison. They had done this before. They knew what those words meant. Yet none of them smiled. For even they, hardened by years of discipline, felt the shadow of what was to come. As night fell, the villagers were gathered in the square. Fires burned in iron bowls, casting red light over the faces of mothers, daughters, and widows. The men of the village lay dead beyond the hills, and the women stood surrounded by warriors who had never been allowed to cry. The silence was suffocating. Then Lysandros stepped forward. "You think your suffering ends with your husband's death," he said, his voice carrying through the dark. "But Sparta believes that defeat must echo through generations. You will not die. Death would be too merciful. You will live, and you will remember." His words spread through the crowd like poison. A young woman near the front gasped. She could not have been more than 20. Her husband's body still lay on the field. She clenched her child's hand tightly, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Please," she whispered, "we have done nothing." Lysandros's gaze softened for a moment, almost imperceptibly. Then he spoke again. "From tonight, your village belongs to Sparta. You will be sent to our city. There, your lives will serve a purpose, not as wives of traitors, but as vessels for a stronger race. Your children will be raised as Spartans. They will forget you, forget your language, forget your gods. Sparta will live through them, and your names will fade." The women began to cry out, their grief breaking the night apart. But the soldiers did not move, did not touch them, did not strike. That was not the Spartan way tonight. They stood as cold statues, letting the terror of the unknown do what swords could not. Later. As torches burned low and the stars blinked above the mountain ridges, Lysandros walked alone through the silent streets. Behind him, the captured women were being gathered, their few possessions packed in silence. In the distance, dogs barked at the scent of death. The night smelled of smoke and despair. Yet within that despair, a strange stillness grew. He found himself standing before the temple at the edge of the village. Inside, a small flame still burned, a sacred fire kept by the priestesses. One of them, an older woman with white hair, stood by the altar. "You think you are a god?" she said quietly when she saw him. "But you are only a man, and men fall." Lysandros paused. "Sparta does not fall." The priestess stepped closer. "Every empire thinks that until its children begin to question the blood that built it." For a heartbeat, something human flickered behind Lysandros's eyes. He had been trained to obey, to suppress doubt, but her words pierced something deep within him. He thought of his own mother, how she had been silent when his father left for war, how she had never cried even when the messengers returned with his father's shield and not his body. That silence, he realized, was what Sparta truly bred, not courage, but emptiness. He turned away before the thought could grow roots. By dawn, the march began. The women were placed in groups, guarded on every side by soldiers. The road to Sparta was long, carved through mountains where eagles circled and the wind carried whispers of the dead. Some women walked barefoot, some carried infants wrapped in torn cloth. Yet none of them spoke. Words had no place in that kind of grief. Days passed. The mountains grew steeper, the rivers colder. Some of the older women collapsed along the way, and the soldiers carried them without a word, neither cruel nor kind, simply efficient. In Sparta, pity was not permitted, but discipline demanded that the conquered survive long enough to serve their purpose. At last, they reached the city, the iron heart of Greece. The Spartan walls were not decorated with carvings or banners, only bare stone and watchful eyes. Inside, the air felt different, as though the city itself breathed power. Every boy they passed was training, every girl watched with silent pride. There was no laughter, only purpose. The women were brought before the council of elders, the Gerousia. The chamber was vast and cold, torches flickering along its stone pillars. The elders, wrapped in crimson cloaks, studied the captives without emotion. The eldest of them, Archon Theron, rose slowly. His voice echoed like wind through a tomb. War leaves behind more than corpses, he said. It leaves behind those who remember. These women remember their husbands, their homes, their gods. Sparta cannot allow memory to become rebellion. Lysandros bowed his head. They will be re-educated. The children will be taken into the agoge. Within a generation, their blood will strengthen our ranks. The elder nodded. See that it is done. As the council dispersed, Lysandros caught sight of the same young woman from the village, the one who had begged for mercy. Her name, he had learned, was Althea. She stood among the others, her face pale but her eyes unbroken. Even now, she did not look away from him. It was as if she saw something behind the armor, something he himself had forgotten existed. That night. In the barracks courtyard, the captives were given food and water. The Spartan women watched from a distance, whispering among themselves. To them, these were the spoils of victory, symbols of their husbands' strength. Yet even they felt a strange unease. They, too, had been raised to obey, to harden their hearts. But as they looked upon the widows of Argos, they saw reflections of themselves, what they might become if Sparta ever lost. Althea sat beneath the shadow of a wall, her child asleep beside her. When she looked up, she saw Lysandros standing a few steps away. He hesitated, then approached. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, he said quietly, "You hate me." She met his eyes. "I don't even know what to call you." A man who follows orders is not the same as the one who gives them. "Which are you?" He didn't answer. The question lingered between them like a blade. Then he turned and walked away, leaving her with the faint sound of marching from the training fields. Rhythm that would haunt her dreams. Days turned to weeks. The women were divided among Spartan households, forced to live as servants or attendants, their every movement observed. Children were taken from their arms, sent to Spartan families to be raised under the state's discipline. Some resisted, some begged, but resistance meant nothing here. Sparta did not need whips or chains. Obedience was carved into the air itself, yet Althea refused to be broken. Each morning, as she carried water from the river, she whispered her husband's name. Each night, she looked toward the northern mountains where Argos had once stood and promised herself that her child would remember who he was. Lysandros watched her from afar. The more he saw her endure, the more uneasy he became. The victory that once filled him with pride now tasted of ash. He had believed that Sparta's strength came from purity, from control, but now he began to see the cost. A city that silenced mercy would one day silence its own soul. Then came the whispers, rumors that Althea was speaking to other captive women, reminding them of their past, teaching them songs in their old tongue. In Sparta, such defiance was dangerous. The elders called for an example to be made. Lysandros stood before the council again, ordered to deliver punishment. He bowed, but his heart was at war with itself. When he left the chamber, the sound of his own footsteps felt heavier than any battle march. That night, as moonlight fell over the city of warriors, he found himself standing outside Althea's quarters, torn between duty and the faint echo of something far older than Sparta, something like conscience. Inside, she sang softly to her child, a melody of her homeland. It was fragile, trembling, but it carried through the night like a prayer. And as Lysandros listened, he realized the unspeakable truth. The greatest cruelty of Sparta was not what it did to the bodies of the conquered, but what it tried to erase from their hearts. And so the seeds of rebellion, silent, patient, invisible, began to grow within the very city that claimed to fear nothing. The dawn over Sparta broke not with peace but with unease. The training fields echoed with the clash of wooden swords, yet something in the rhythm felt off. The drills were sharp, the discipline perfect, but beneath it all was a tension, a silence between strikes, a hesitation in the air that only a soldier could sense. It was the kind of silence that comes before a storm. Lysandros stood atop the training terrace, overlooking the barracks below. His eyes were fixed on the horizon, where the mountains carved their jagged lines against the sky. He had fought a dozen wars, commanded legions of men, conquered cities, but now, the battle that haunted him was one he could not see. It lived in whispers, in eyes that refused to lower, in the haunting melody of a foreign lullaby sung by captive women in the night. Althea's defiance had not gone unnoticed. The council's patience was thinning, and already some of the younger warriors had begun to question why their city, so proud, so ruthless, was afraid of a woman's song. Rumor had twisted her image into something half divine, half dangerous. They called her the voice of Argos. To the captives, she was hope. To the elders, she was infection. When the command came, it was swift and cold. End the whisper before it becomes a war. Lysandros received the order without speaking. The parchment felt heavier than any sword he had ever lifted. That night, as he sat alone by the training ground fire, he remembered his father's words, "A Spartan obeys before he thinks." But for the first time in his life, obedience felt like betrayal. In the lower quarters of the city, Althea gathered with a small circle of women. Their faces were gaunt, their hands calloused from labor, but their eyes burned with quiet fire. They had nothing left to lose. Around them, children slept on straw mats, children taken from different lands, raised under Spartan law, their tongues already forgetting their mother's words. Althea looked at them with sorrow and resolve. It's not the sword we fear, she whispered. It's forgetting. The day we forget who we were, Sparta wins forever. The women nodded. Some wept silently. Others clenched their fists. They had no weapons, no soldiers, no hope of victory in the way Sparta understood it. But they had something the Spartans could never forge: love born from loss. Courage born from grief. Days later, the first act of defiance came quietly. A child in the Agoj, the brutal Spartan training school, refused to speak the oaths of allegiance. When questioned, he said his mother taught him another name, another song. The instructors punished him harshly, but whispers spread through the ranks. He's one of the Argive children. Soon after, strange symbols began appearing on the stone walls near the women's quarters, marks that looked like ancient runes of Argos, carved with bits of broken pottery. No one saw who did it, but every Spartan who passed them felt something stir: anger, unease, perhaps even guilt. Lysandros knew what it meant. Althea was no longer just surviving. She was fighting, quietly, cleverly, and dangerously. When the elders summoned him again, their patience had vanished. Archon Theron's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. You have grown soft, Lysandros. The woman lives because you let her. Her defiance spreads like fire among the slaves. Do you serve Sparta or your own conscience? Lysandros met the old man's gaze. I serve the city. But even Sparta cannot kill an idea. Theron's eyes narrowed. Then let her die and see if her idea dies with her. Outside the hall, the streets of Sparta were alive with whispers. The women of the conquered lands had begun leaving small offerings by the temple's olive branches, bits of cloth, carved stones, all marked with the sign of a phoenix. It was a symbol forbidden in Sparta, a mark of rebirth. The guards tried to clear them, but by dawn, more always appeared. It was as if the city itself was being haunted by the memory of those it had conquered. That night, Lysandros walked to the lower quarters again. The moonlight washed the city in pale silver, and from somewhere deep in the shadows, he heard it again, the song. Althea's voice, soft but unyielding, carried through the stone corridors. He followed it until he found her standing by a small fire, her child asleep beside her. The other women gathered close. She stopped when she saw him. For a moment, the only sound was the crackling of the fire. Then she said, "You came to finish it." Lysandros stepped forward slowly. "You're making this harder for both of us." She smiled faintly. "If I make it hard for you, then maybe your heart still remembers how to feel." Her words struck deep. He wanted to tell her that he understood, that he too felt the chains of Sparta's law tightening around his soul, but words failed him. Instead, he drew his dagger, not to strike, but to throw it into the fire. The flames hissed as the metal vanished within. "I won't be your executioner," he said quietly. "But if you stay, they will send another who will not hesitate." Althea's eyes widened. "Then what do you suggest? Run? Where can I go that Sparta won't follow?" Lysandros looked toward the mountains. "North. The passes are guarded, but at dawn the watch changes. You'll have a chance, one chance." She stared at him, disbelief and hope warring in her face. "Why are you doing this?" He hesitated. "Because even a Spartan can get tired of obeying." Before dawn, the escape began. Althea and a small group of women slipped through the shadows of the sleeping city, carrying their children, clutching small sacks of food. Lysandros led them through hidden paths he had learned as a boy. Every sound, every breath felt louder than thunder. The cold mountain air cut their lungs, but freedom pulled them onward. They reached the outer gate just as the horizon began to glow red. A single guard stood watch, half asleep. Lysandros signaled for silence, but a child stumbled on a loose stone, the clatter echoing through the night. The guard turned, saw them, and the alarm horn blared. Run! Lysandros shouted. The women ran, their feet pounding the rocky ground, their breath ragged. Behind them, the sound of boots thundered from the city. Arrows hissed through the air. One woman fell, another turned back, but Althea pressed forward, clutching her child. Lysandros drew his sword and stood his ground. Facing his own men, they came in a flood of bronze and scarlet, shouting his name, demanding to know why he was aiding the captives. He fought them not to kill but to delay, every strike precise, every movement desperate. The sun rose over the ridge, casting golden light over the chaos. By the time the soldiers reached him, the women had disappeared into the mountain fog. Lysandros was dragged before the council, bloodied but unbroken. Theron's fury was volcanic. "You have betrayed your city, your brothers, your name." Lysandros lifted his head. "No, I have remembered what Sparta forgot, that strength means nothing when it destroys its own soul." The sentence was death. As he was led to the execution ground, he saw the faces of Spartan boys watching, their expressions unreadable. He wondered if one of them might one day question, as he had. Perhaps that would be enough. Far beyond the city walls, in the mountain passes, Althea and the others kept moving. Days turned to weeks. The journey was brutal, cold, hunger, fear, but they survived. Each night they lit small fires, hidden under stones, and sang softly to keep the children from crying. The songs of Argos echoed once again through the hills. They reached a valley where the ruins of an old temple stood, a place long abandoned, forgotten even by Sparta. There, they built shelter and began anew. Word spread among the wandering refugees. And soon others joined them, women from conquered lands, men who had fled Spartan enslavement, even a few soldiers who had deserted after seeing what their city had become, from that hidden refuge. The whisper of Argos was born, for years, the small community lived in secrecy. They taught their children not the ways of war, but of memory. They told stories of the cities that once stood proud before Sparta's rise. And among them, Althea became a symbol not of revenge, but of endurance. The phoenix of the forbidden carvings became their sign, painted in ash and oil, glowing like Defiance itself. Meanwhile, Sparta changed. The old warriors died. New ones rose. The wars never truly stopped. Yet strange rumors began to reach the city, rumors of mountain villages that took in escaped captives, of children who spoke both Spartan and Argive, of songs that turned soldiers' hearts heavy when they heard them on the wind. The elders dismissed it as superstition, but in the night the younger Spartans listened more closely, wondering what truth the wind carried. One evening, many years later, as Althea sat beside the fire with her grown son, she heard footsteps approach. From the mist emerged a young warrior, Spartan armor, scarred shield, but his eyes were gentle. He knelt before her and placed something at her feet, a scarlet cloak. "This belonged to Lysandros," he said. "He died with your name on his lips?" "I was his student." Althea touched the cloak, her eyes glistening. "Did he suffer?" The warrior shook his head. "He died standing, but he left a message. He said Sparta will one day learn that even the strongest walls fall to the softest voice." Althea looked to the horizon, where dawn began to rise once more. "Then perhaps," she whispered, "Sparta has already begun to fall." Years passed, and the city of Sparta, still powerful, still feared, began to decay from within. Its people forgot why they fought. Its laws, once sacred, became chains that strangled even its own sons. And in the mountains, where the phoenix banners fluttered in the wind, the descendants of the conquered lived free. They remembered everything, the cruelty, the courage, the songs of the lost. They carried the story of Lysandros and Althea as a legend, the tale of a Spartan who defied his own city, and a woman whose voice broke the silence of an empire. And so, when travelers passed through the ruins centuries later, they sometimes swore they could still hear it, the faint echo of a woman's song drifting through the stones. Soft and haunting, like a memory that refused to die, because in the end, what Sparta did to the wives of its defeated enemies was indeed unspeakable, but what those women did in return was unforgettable.